Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I'm looking at some Dynasty sells. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. Player one, Tank Dell. So some might wonder, why is Dell a sell right now? I mean, Stephon Diggs just tore his ACL. It's a great opportunity for Dell to step up, but I think this is an opportunity to capitalize on value for Dell that he might not realize. So far in 7 games, Dell has 24 catches, 229 yards, 2 touchdowns on 38 targets, 3.4 catches, and 32.7 yards a game. He's basically done nothing. It's a really, really disappointing second year. In the 3 games without Nico Collins, Dell has totaled 11 catches, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, 2 touchdowns are nice, but 92 yards over 3 games is not. He had 4 targets in 2 of those games, even including the one where Stephon Diggs got hurt. And he was outproduced by Dalton Schultz over that time. So Dell has been bad even with Collins out. Now, for me, there are so many reasons why Dell is a dynasty sell. You can see kind of the list here. We'll go through them one at a time. Collins is going to return in week 10 from his hamstring injury. It's very clear. He's on track. Next week, Nico Collins will play, and he will return to being the alpha wide receiver 1 on this team. Stephon Diggs is out for the year, but he's a free agent. The Texans don't have that much money committed to him, so they could add a wide receiver via trade. They were linked to a few wide receivers. They missed out on Diontae Johnson, who would have been a good 1-for-1 replacement for Diggs. But they're 6-2. I'm not saying the Texans will make a massive move, but they probably will make a move. Either way, though, Collins had 32 catches, 567 yards, and 3 touchdowns in 5 games, despite leaving one of those games early and playing 20% of the snaps in that game. He more than doubled Dell's yardage in 2 fewer games. These are not close players, similar players. Like, think of it as, a team like, not that Nico Collins is quite there, but like imagine that he were Justin Jefferson or a CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase, someone that good that tamps down the production of anyone else on the team. That's how good Collins is. But last year, Dell in 11 games was still pretty good. 47 catches, 709 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4.3 catches, and 64.5 yards a game. He's extremely efficient. But one thing that he didn't have was a lot of volume. He rode on touchdowns and long plays, and I think that's the kind of player Dell is. We have to accept what Dell is, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that he's bad, but he's not going to be a volume receiver, and especially not with Nico Collins present and under a long-term contract. Now, what do? How do you get out from under Tank Dell? Well, Dell still carries a lot of value in Dynasty, I'm noticing. I think this may be a high point for him this season, though, right now when he's the only healthy wide receiver. I saw this deal in the Dynasty data trade database. Sell Tank Dell and David Montgomery for Breece Hall. Yes, it's really in there. I usually don't advocate for buying high-priced running backs, but there are always exceptions. This other one, sell Tank Dell, Tucker Kraft, and Jameis Winston for Brian Thomas. Well, I mean, these are some interesting assets, but Brian Thomas is a star. I would much rather have Brian Thomas over this combination of meh assets. And then this one, I mean, sell Tank Dell for 26 first and 27 first. I guess you never know. You can always try. You never know what will happen. Obviously, I would take the 2 firsts here without a second thought. These are all options to sell Tank Dell. I would look to explore moving on if you had Tank Dell shares. Next player on my list, Rhamondre Stevenson. Now, I don't think he's a bad player or a bad running back, but I think now might be a good time to move on from him in Dynasty. So far this year in 7 games, 104 carries, 422 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.1 yards a carry, and 18 catches for 61 yards. Receiving volume way down. Lowest catches and yards, receiving yards per game, and it's by a lot. More rushing volume, but the efficiency's gone from his 2022 monster year. This is more like last year and even less on the receiving volume. He's also fumbled 4 times this year, which has caused his job security to decline, maybe long-term more so than this year. Now, the thing about Rhamondre Stevenson is I think there's some perceived safety with him that doesn't really exist. We know he signed a 4-year, $36 million extension, but there's only $17 million guaranteed before the season. Some of the guarantees were paid out this year. The contract runs through 2028, but the Patriots essentially have 0 committed to him in 2027 and 2028, and they can cut him and save money as soon as the 2026 offseason. We also know that these type of mid-size contracts, where at the end of the day, only $17 million was guaranteed, and some of that was paid this year, they don't stop teams from replacing or adding to running back rooms. They just don't. Teams will add a running back even if they already have a running back under contract. Stevenson has 5 rushing touchdowns on 104 carries this year. He's never had more than 5 touchdowns in any previous season. I don't think we can expect this level of touchdown scoring for Stevenson as a regular thing. And last game, he had 20 carries for 48 yards, so abysmal efficiency, but he had 2 touchdowns and 3 catches for 17 yards. Great fantasy game. He played 81% of the snaps. Now, what does that say? The Patriots' other running backs are horrible. I mean, we've seen enough from Antonio Gibson. He's not it. Jermichael Hasty, we know, is not it. This usage on this type of efficiency will not continue long-term. Stevenson's already 26 years old and turns 27 in the offseason. We know some running backs age gracefully. We've seen that. Not every running back, though. We see there are Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara continue 28, 29. They still playing well. James Conner. We also see Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, 27, 28, and kind of finished. So which one is Rhamondre Stevenson? There's really no way to know, but considering he hasn't really been elite efficiency-wise since 2022, I'd lean more toward the negative side on Rhamondre Stevenson. Now, how can you sell him? Well, he's not going to bring back a massive return, but this might be one of the final chances to even get a good return. Here's a couple trades. Sell Rhamondre Stevenson and Rashod White for a 2025 first. Well, I would definitely do that. It's combining 2 gross assets for 1 good one. It's a nice move, especially in a rebuild. Sell Rhamondre Stevenson for Jalen Waddle. Well, I mean, I'm a little worried about the Dolphins' wide receiving assets, but not that worried. I would definitely take Waddle here. And then this last one, sell Rhamondre Stevenson for a 2026 first. This is probably the most realistic one. People give up their year out first too early. I would easily take this first and just be out of Rhamondre Stevenson. Definitely would be a player I'm looking to sell right now. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Always forget to put that up. Tiers will get at just $6 a month and include all of that. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out both of my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. I'm going to make a post about this on the YouTube channel, but it just really helps when people sign up. It's hard. Independent content is hard. I mean, YouTube ad dollars are not what they once were. Third party, sponsorships don't exist as much anymore. It's hard. So if you like my content and want it to continue, please support the Patreon. I'll say this in the most blunt terms. There is a universe in which the Patreon continues to exist without the YouTube. There is no universe in which the YouTube continues to exist if the Patreon fails. That's the most blunt, honest terms that I can put it in. With that said, let's move on to our next player. So you might ask why Aiyuk is a sell, Brandon Aiyuk. He's out for the year and won't provide any more value in 2024, but somehow I still think he's overvalued. In 2024, 25 catches, 34 yards, 47 targets, 3.6 catches, and 3.4 yards a game. Not great numbers, way off his previous performances. No touchdowns. He had one massive game in week 5 with 8 catches, 147 yards on 12 targets. Otherwise, he failed to exceed 50 yards in any other game, 2 catches in 4 of his 7 games. Season never got off the ground for Aiyuk after the contract dispute. Now, for me, I think there's a lot of reasons why Aiyuk is a sell. In retrospect, his 2023 performance looks like an efficiency outlier. 75 catches, 1,342 yards, 7 touchdowns, 105 targets, 4.7 catches, and 83.9 yards a game. I mean, those are really, really efficient numbers. That's ridiculous yards per reception. But only 105 targets. In 2022, 78 catches, 1,015 yards, 8 touchdowns, 114 targets, 4.6 catches, and 59.7 yards a game. So almost the same catches, but 24 fewer yards per game. Aiyuk's 2022 performance is far more in line with his 2020, 2021, and 2024 performances. If you look at Aiyuk this year, outside of week 1 and week 7, the game he got injured in the first game he got back, very similar to his 2022 performance. Maybe we're going to look back at Aiyuk's career and say 2023 was an outlier. He was a very good receiver the rest of the time, but not a game breaker, not a fantasy wide receiver 1, none of that. Now, Aiyuk's not a bad wide receiver. Nobody's saying that. But he's never averaged more than 5 catches a game, and that was in 2020. And now we have some issues. So he seems to have a torn ACL, MCL, and there was talk of other damage. Other usually means meniscus. This type of knee injury is not just a clean ACL tear. Aiyuk faces a challenge to be ready for week 1 in 2025. I would bet that he's not ready. I'm going to say that again, not ready for week 1 in 2025. That's my assumption at this time. So what does that mean? Will the 49ers now keep Deebo Samuel for 2025? Before Aiyuk's injury, I think their plan was pretty clear. Sign Brock Purdy to a big deal. Promote Ricky Pearsall to wide receiver 2. Have Juwan Jennings as wide receiver 3. And have CMC and George Kittle to complement the offense while trading Deebo away. But now, can you really go into 2025 with Pearsall and Jennings as your only major wide receivers, especially after Pearsall's development was disrupted by the shooting incident before this year? Could the 49ers try to keep Samuel and run it back just one more time in the year before Purdy's contract really starts to kick in? They have to extend him, but the last year of his rookie deal is still present for 2025. So they might be able to keep it together one final time. And it depends on just how long Aiyuk is going to be out. Now, how do you sell Brandon Aiyuk? I think he's still valued to some as if he's just going to waltz back in and be 2023 Aiyuk again. We know that's not a guarantee. Chris Godwin suffered a dual ACL MCL injury in 2021. He was a year younger than Aiyuk is now and wasn't the same player again until this year. Even though he was still good, wasn't the same. He wasn't a fantasy difference maker until 3 years later. So, sell Brandon Aiyuk in 2.25 thirds for Rome Odunze. Maybe this is more of a commentary on Rome Odunze, but this is easy. I would easily rather have Rome Odunze. Then there's this one. Sell Brandon Aiyuk for Diontae Johnson, Najee Harris, and Kareem Hunt. I get why you would do this. I mean, Diontae Johnson, not a good landing spot on the Ravens. Najee Harris gives you some value this year. Kareem Hunt, the same. I mean, if you're trying to win, I get it. I mean, it's not the type of deal I'd usually make, but if you need it, I'm actually okay with doing this. I don't think you're going to miss out on that much. And then this last one is wild. So Brandon Aiyuk for Michael Pittman in 26 first. I'm not sure that Brandon Aiyuk is worth more than Michael Pittman now. So yeah, this is an easy smash. Except now I have a couple of pieces of NFL news. Let's just get into it. Diontae Johnson traded to the Ravens. Ravens gave up a 25 fifth for Diontae Johnson and 25-6. So essentially nothing. They gave up nothing to get Diontae Johnson. He had no trade market. This year so far, 30 catches, 357 yards, 3 touchdowns on 58 targets, 4.3 catches and 51 yards a game. He was great with Dalton, nothing with Bryce Young. In 5 games with Dalton, 25 catches, 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, 46 targets, 5 catches and 64.6 yards a game. Still dealt with inaccurate targets, but he was a target hog. He's going to struggle to do anything like this on the Ravens. The Ravens have 260 carries compared to 237 passing attempts. They do call a lot of pass plays, but there's a lot of quarterback scrambles in there, leaving the target pie relatively small. And the big thing for the Ravens is in any game they're winning, the entire passing offense can just disappear. Lamar Jackson has 17 passing touchdowns, 8.9 yards per attempt, and 262.4 passing yards a game. Yards per attempt and passing yards a game are career highs. Passing touchdowns is close to on pace for a career high. It's possible they continue to pass at this rate. They could run the ball more with Derrick Henry when facing favorable game scripts. All Ravens receiving weapons are now risky. Flowers, I'm pretty confident in still. I'm interested maybe in buying low in Dynasty because he's young and flash talent. Overall, Johnson, Andrews, and Likely, not so interested. I don't think you're going to be able to trust them or Rashod Bateman on any week. And lastly, Jalen Coker is a must-add in all Dynasty leagues. He's going to fill the starting spot for now opposite Xavier Legette. He might flash, especially if Andy Dalton goes back into the starting lineup. Next up, Anthony Richardson, benched for Joe Flacco. Wild how quickly Richardson was benched, but he was horrible this year. 44.4% completion, 958 yards, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 7.2 yards per attempt, 41 carries, 242 yards, touchdown. It's not giving enough in running yards. I mean, 40 rushing yards a game is good, but it's not enough to make up for being an abysmal passer. And don't let the 7.2 yards per attempt fool you. A lot of it's come on a few big plays. It's nice to have the big plays, but you have to execute on a play-by-play basis. And overall, he's really been awful. Richardson's probably done as the Colts starter. Quarterbacks who are benched by their initial team rarely ever go back in and become a franchise quarterback for that team. It just doesn't happen. He might get another chance to play, but the Colts are in the 2025 quarterback market. Not sure what that market looks like, but they are in that market. Josh Downs has 32 catches, 351 yards, and 3 touchdowns in just 6 games this year. Despite playing with Richardson, Downs has really leveled up this year. In the games with Flacco, though, Downs has been elite. He's had at least 9 targets, 66 yards, and 7 catches in all the games where Flacco started or played the majority of snaps. Downs is going to be a solid wide receiver 2 with Flacco in, Probably too late to buy in for Dynasty, but we got to love what we have with Josh Downs. As for Michael Pittman, might be a Dynasty sell. I mean, he's had just one great game all year, wasn't consistent even with Flacco, obviously hurting with back injury. I'm a little worried about Pittman. It's possible Downs has overtaken him in the target pecking order. If I could get a first, even in 2026 for Pittman, I'd still take it. Probably not realistic to get one in 2025. I would obviously prefer that. And then I saw this trade, Pittman at 25 second for Jalen Waddle. I like the idea of buying low on Waddle. I haven't totally quit on him. Now, I have a Patreon question, so we'll get into that, and then we'll close out the show. Cedric Tillman's outlook rest of season. I love that Jameis Winston is his quarterback, but players like Tillman are difficult. They pop up, they have 2 great games, then it's unclear. What is the deal the rest of the season? In this case, though, Amari Cooper's gone, so the role as X receiver is there for Tillman. I do believe that Tillman can remain relevant rest of season. I'm not expecting Tillman to score 2 touchdowns every week or to be a fantasy wide receiver 1. But with Jameis Winston, I think that Tillman can have, I'll say wide receiver 3 value rest of season. I will say, I don't know. I mean, is Tillman someone I really believe in long-term? No. Would it surprise me if Tillman was a starter on this team next year? No. I mean, maybe he will be. They did draft him in the 3rd round, so he has decent draft capital. But I don't know if I'm buying in on him anymore. Probably not paying a second for Tillman even in Dynasty, and you won't get him for a 3rd. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, start sit, redraft, and more can sign up right there. Patreon.com/fantasy advice. Every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.